Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. When your stepdad tries to play house, but forgets it's your house he's playing in. Today in the rLounge, it's eviction time. Stepdad wants me to pay rent as I'm an adult. He doesn't know I own the house, so I kicked him out. I recently turned 18 and it led to a major confrontation between me and my stepdad. The day after my 18th birthday, he handed me a piece of paper with a list of things I should be paying for. The topmost in the list, and the most significant part, was the house rent, followed by food and electricity. I was in shock. His action implied that he had been waiting for me to hit adulthood so that he could dump all that responsibility on my shoulders. My dad passed away when I was really young, like 8 or something. It was super tough for me to lose my big dude at that age. My mom was there to support me. Growing up, it was just my mom and me. It was like the two of us against the world. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Mom worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, and I did my part by being a responsible kid. I rocked in school and also took up the responsibility of household chores as much as I could. I could make a simple dinner by the age of 10 and slay the dishes. We had a tiny 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. Life was peaceful. Things started to shake when I was 14. My mom met this dim-wit man, David. He seemed caring and loving at first. Very soon, he became regular at our place, and within a year, they were married. Initially, I was happy for my mom. It was after a very long time that I had seen her happy. She deserved someone to take care of her, and David seemed like the perfect man. At least, he posed himself to be at the time. He butted into our house, and for a while, things seemed okay. Soon enough, he started shedding off his mask and showed his nasty attitude. He was controlling, demanding, and had a short temper. He made it clear that he was the head of the house and expected everyone to follow his rules. My mom, who had always been strong and independent, seemed to wilt under his authority. I watched helplessly her becoming more and more submissive, afraid to stand up to him. Watching her change her personality made me wonder the foundation of the relationship. I don't know why she fell for him in the first place. Loneliness and desperation can actually fog your brain, and I could see that happening to my mom. I protested when she stood with him, even though it was clear he was toxic. David and I never got along. He saw me as a threat, someone who challenged his authority and disrupted his control over my mom. He would insist I call him Dad. I laughed at his face and called him David. Yeah, I'm a rebel. He felt that to be insulting because that wouldn't feed his ego. I said he can do whatever he wants, but I'm not going to call him Dad. We got into arguments and he called me ungrateful and disrespectful. He complained about how much it cost to feed and clothe me, even though it was my mom who was working 2 jobs to make ends meet. It took until I could, but once I started giving him back, I spitted venom on him. If he called me ungrateful, I would call him a bum. However, my mom would always mediate and insist I apologize because whatever be it, he was my stepdad. I never apologized, and that created a dent in my relationship with my mom. A few months back, I completed high school, and now I'm applying for an undergrad at a local college. My intention for scouting a local college is to save on the rent. I spend half of my day at college and the remaining time at work. I've taken up a part-time job and thought of living at home and saving that money to pay for my college expenses. But this jerk got different plans for me. Now I really don't know what to do. I can't afford the money he has been demanding. He said he was giving me a discount as I'm not earning full-time, but the amount is still ridiculously high for a college student. I'm an adult now and I cannot fight with him to let me live for free. Really don't know what to do. Do you guys know any better way of slaying this situation? Sounds like David is trying to give you a crash course in adulthood, complete with unexpected fees and a syllabus on how to dodge them. Maybe you should start a counter-proposal. Charge him for all those years of unpaid dishwashing and teenage angst. It's time he learned the cost of being a stepdad. Update 1. Things got worse. Not for me, but for David. As some of you suggested, it was better to live outside if I anyway had to pay my rent. So I started hunting out for cheap dungeons. I posted on Facebook about it. My uncle, father's brother, saw the post. He asked me why wasn't I living in my own house. We were not in touch with any of the relatives after Dad's death. I left him on scene. Then he congratulated me on the house. His message goes, "Oh, I realize you're 18 now. Congratulations on the house. Must be feeling grateful to your dad, huh?" I got confused. What the hell was that? Until then it never occurred to me as to who owned the house. I thought it was of Dad's, and after that it got transferred to Mom's. Or maybe it was still in Dad's name. I never cared to ask Mom about it. Curiosity got the better of me, and I asked my uncle what did he mean. He replied, "Your father left that house to you, didn't he?" I said, "I don't know. He disappeared after that." 2 days later he replied, "Sorry, maybe some misunderstanding. Check with your mom. And that's it. I chased him for more context, but he ghosted me. He dropped the bombshell and vanished. Several thoughts crossed my mind. I thought maybe my father willed the house to me, and my mother had whisked it away when I was a kid. I got suspicious of David if he had forged the document or taken our house. I didn't want to go to mom with half-baked info. I spoke to my friend about this, and he suggested I reach out to my dad's lawyer, but how do I find him? So I decided to give the benefit of the doubt to my mom and confront her regarding David's demand for the rent. I hadn't discussed this with mom until then. I thought she was game with his ask. I didn't want to have this conversation in front of a half-minded junkie, so I scooped out some time off from work and went to my mom's workplace. I asked her if she knew David had demanded I pay for rent, food, and electricity. She was shocked. She said she had no clue. She assured me I didn't have to pay anything and I could live in the house until I wanted. I asked her hesitantly, "Mom, who's the owner of the house?" She was taken aback. Her reaction terrified me because my question was very simple. She fumbled for an answer. I asked, "Was it Dad's house or yours?" She quickly replied, "It was your dad's house, and honey, I have to rush. I have a lot of pending work for today. We'll talk later, and don't worry about paying the rent." She went back inside her office. From her reaction, one could definitely make out it was murky behind the curtain. When I came home that day, David was staring at me with red eyes. I ignored him for a while, but he seemed deliberate to mess up with me. I gathered my spine and asked him what's the matter. He screamed that I told him to my mother. I said I didn't whine. I had just told her what was happening in the house. He said he is the man of the house and he makes decisions about the house, and I have to pay the rent. I didn't back down. I shot back in the same tone. "Is this your house? No, right? Then who gave you the right to ask me for the rent? Do you pay my food and electricity bills? No, is it? Then why are you opening your crappy mouth?" He was like, "My wife pays for it." I screamed, "Yes, your wife is my mother, and if she doesn't have a problem feeding me, why do you put your grumpy nose in our business?" My mom was in the shower, maybe. She came running outside and heard me screaming. I told her that David was asking me for the rent. She looked at David and said in a firm voice, "He is my son, and he would not pay anything to live here." For the first time in so many years, I heard her talking to him in real tone. He backed off and went into the bedroom. He had no right to demand rent from me, especially since he wasn't even contributing financially to the household. My mom's income covered most of our expenses, and David's occasional odd jobs barely made a dent. After David was gone, my mom tried to calm me down. I asked her who owned the house, and she said, "This is your father's house, and no one's going to ask you to leave or pay rent." I still insisted on knowing who owned the house, whether it was still in Dad's name or had she transferred it into hers. She said, "How does that matter?" I said, "It matters to me. If it was in her name, then her loser husband can show his claim, but if it's in my dad's name, I'm going to kick that rookie out of this place." Tears rolled down my mom's cheeks, and she calmed me down, saying I shouldn't harbor hatred against my stepdad. Her tears made me suspicious, and I blurted out, "Are you hiding something? Is this house mine?" She broke down, and my suspicions got clear. You see, my dad was bedridden for a year before dying, so if you do 2 + 2 with my uncle's message and this situation, it was kind of a no-brainer to conclude that my dad would have given the house to me. She took me to my room, locked the door, and said, "Yes, this house is yours. Your dad gave this to you and made me the custodian until you turned 18. I asked, "Then why are you whispering? Why did you sweep this under the rug?" She lowered her head and said she was afraid of how David would react if he found out that I, a teenager, owned the house he lived in. I said, "I'm not a teenager anymore. It's been 3 months since I turned 18. When were you planning to reveal this secret?" She said she was figuring out the best way to go forward. "And what was that?" She said if she had made it clear to David that he wouldn't ask me to pay anything to live in the house. I screamed, "That's it? What about him living in my house for free?" She said, "But honey, he's your stepfather." I shouted, "He is nothing to me but your husband, whom I have tolerated enough, but not anymore." I stormed out of the house. I saw David coming out of his room upon hearing my screams. I don't know what happened after that. I have been living with my friend since 2 days. Today, my mom came to my workplace and requested me to return home. I was not in a situation for confrontation, so I said, "Okay," and asked her to leave. I have texted her that I want my dad's will and the other documents. She asked me to come home and discuss the matter. The thing is, I know what will happen when I go home. She would use her tears to manipulate me and let David live in the house. Though I know the house is mine, I have no documents to prove it. What should I do now? Is there any chance she or David can whisk away the property under my nose? Whoa, that's quite the revelation, OP. If your mom and David try to mess with the house you rightfully inherited, it might be time to get proactive. Consider calmly insisting on seeing the documents to prove ownership. It's essential to stay level-headed and gather all the facts before making any decisions. Update 2. Hello all. Thanks for erupting on my comment box. Let me pick up from where I left off. So I came back home after a week. As usual, David's lazy bum was lying on the couch. He asked me where I was for the week. I ignored his existence and walked past him. He got agitated and repeated the same sentence. I stopped and stared at him. He said, "Ooh, I got scared. What are you going to do this time? Complain to your mommy? Go, run and complain. You think complaining to her would save your fat butt from paying this rent? I'm going to get that from you." I knew that dummy was clueless that I owned the house. I smiled at him and said, "I owned the house and I wouldn't be paying a cent. Instead of finding ways to make me bend, watch out for yourself when I throw you out of this house." His face turned red with anger and disbelief. Then he burst out in laughter and said, "You got me. Good bluffing, you dog." He demanded to see the proof. I asked, does he have evidence that the house was in my mother's name? He said no. I said, then let's seek the papers and check the real owner. That evening, when my mom arrived, I heard there was a huge fight between them. The next day, when I went home, my mom shoved my dad's will and the property documents on my face. She blamed me for their fight. I ignored her drama and went to my room. The documents had the details of my dad's lawyer. I immediately contacted him and asked him about the process for transferring the property officially to my name. I went outside to find David lounging on the couch. I called his name loudly. That pisses him off. I said, "Now that you know I own the house, I want you to pay rent. Not only for this month and going forward, but also for the last 3 months since I turned 18. David's reaction was explosive. He called my mother from the other room and said I was asking for rent. That timid woman said sure, she would pay it for next month. I yelled at her that I don't want money from her, but from him. He lost his temper, and I lost mine. We got into a huge fight and name-calling. To mediate the situation, my mom told David to pay the rent while she would cover the other expenses of the house. He accused me of scheming against him and manipulating my mom. This dude had the audacity to demand that I turn the house over to him, claiming that, as the man of the house, he should be the rightful owner. I laughed in his face and said he should be thankful I was not kicking him out of the house. He started yelling at my mom, blaming her for keeping the secret and siding with me. I had enough. I cannot see my mom getting exploited by this nutcase. Though she was not standing up for herself, I wanted to do my bit. I told David he had 24 hours to pack his things and leave. He tried to argue, but I threatened to call the cops on him if he ever raised his voice on me again. He stormed out of the house. My mom comes to me crying. She requested me to let David live with us, and she would pay me for the rent. I yelled at her for feeding David's ego and encouraging his narcissism. She sobbed and said people have to adjust in love. She was afraid that David might leave her if she didn't listen to him. She said, "It's difficult to find love at this age. After your father's death, it took me so many years to start dating again, and if this one also fails, I would end up living alone in my old age." I said better to live alone happily than with someone like David. I admired her when she was fierce, who was ready to take the world alone, but now she is reduced to being David's doormat, and I have no sympathy for her tears. The next day, David was gone. My mom was devastated. She loved him despite his flaws and couldn't believe that I kicked him out. She accused me of tearing the family apart and said that I had no right to ruin her life. She resents me for what I had done, and I'm struggling to understand why she couldn't see that I was trying to protect us. I just couldn't see her paying for that toxic man while he sloths on the couch the whole day. She says I'm too young to understand the complexities of a grown-up relationship. Is it really so? I don't know. If a mature relationship wants me to be a floor mat, then I don't want to have one. Well, it sounds like you've graduated from dealing with high school drama to managing adult-sized melodramas at home. Who knew owning a house at 18 would come with a side of eviction threats and a family feud? If David wants to play house, he'll have to find a new couch to surf on. And as for your mom's love life, maybe she should consider swiping left on the couch potatoes next time. Remember, in this house, you decide who gets the remote control. Update 3. Hey guys, I got another update. So after David left, Mom and I had countless arguments. Sometimes I felt guilty for causing her so much pain. Earlier, I wondered why she needed a husband when she was providing for herself, but later on, seeing her loneliness, I felt David left a void in her life. However, I was convinced that he was no good to Mom. I know I shouldn't be making decisions for her, but in this situation, I felt she was better off without him. She is 47. She still has a lot of time to explore love than to settle down with a junkie. I tried to keep her happy, but she withdrew herself from me. I focused on my studies and tried to give her the space she needed. I hoped that, in time, she would come to see that kicking David out was the best thing for us. I also contributed more to the household expenses, even though I didn't need to pay rent. I wanted to offload her burden. Eventually, Mom and I started getting along, and she joked about how she lost her assertive tone living with David. He made her think she was too bold and dominating to be loved and turned her into a submissive slave. Just when things were starting to stabilize, David reappeared. He showed up at our doorstep one evening, looking disheveled and desperate. He claimed he had nowhere else to go and begged my mom to let him stay. She was torn. Despite everything, she still had feelings for him and didn't want to see him homeless. I was furious. After everything he had put us through, he had the nerve to come back and ask for help. My mom was caught in the middle, and I knew it was a difficult decision for her. She was not yet over him completely. She requested me to let David stay with us for a few days. Apparently, she needed some closure with him. I really don't get the complexities of these relationships. I freaked out and said I cannot share the roof with him. Even if he stays for a day, I would move out. After a huge fighting match, my mom let David stay for a few days while figuring things out. I packed my bags and moved into a friend's apartment temporarily. I was hurt and disappointed. After all he did to her, she still chose him. Love is toxic, I tell you. 2 days later, Mom called and told me that David wanted to apologize to me and make amends. She swore he was a changed man now. I asked her what would I do with his apology. She said she didn't raise me to be mean and arrogant and that I should forgive him and we start living like a family as before. I said David was never a family to me and there's no way I would share the roof with him. Living with him like a family, my butt. I'll kick him in his butt if he stays for one extra day in my house. After a long silence, my mom said, if he goes, she goes out too. I was almost in tears hearing this. After all, she chose him over me. I said I'm fine to let her go if she feels she's better off with David. It's been a week since I've been living alone. I do have a spell of guilt feeling, but I am standing firm in my decision. Letting go of my mom was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, but it was also the right one. I don't know if my mom would ever realize that she chose the wrong side and is wasting her life with David. Sometimes I feel it wouldn't have cost me anything to let them live in the house, but then I cannot imagine living with deadbeat David. Is it normal to feel this way, or am I going nuts? Choosing between peace of mind and letting toxic people back into your life isn't easy. Maybe in a parallel universe, David would have turned into a model housemate who pays rent on time and never leaves dirty dishes in the sink. But in this universe, it's okay to draw a line in the sand and prioritize your own sanity. You absolutely did the right thing here, OP. It's your mother's loss. What do you think? Thank you for joining us today in the rLounge. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you soon. And put your chair back where you found it.